All the choices you made, would you make them again, 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 again? All the lies that you told, did you believe in them?
Good morning, my viewers. It's probably really dark in here. You can't really see me that well. But today it's gonna be a pretty lit day because we got some very special plans coming up. And one of those special plans is actually we're gonna be going to go visit a South Carolina plantation house. And if you don't know what a plantation house is, it's pretty much a ex-slave house. And it's going to be really interesting to just go visit, to go see the history, to learn about my ancestors, and just learn about like the society back then. And you probably can't even see me right now because it's really dark in here. Let's get stay started.
You make them choices you made, would you make them again?
All the choices you made, would you make them again?
Hold on to your hats, 284 years old. And that is the original siding that you see on the house. It needs to be scraped and painted from time to time, as you can see. It's still the original. It's made out of black cypress, which is impervious to rot, obviously, and to insects. So the windows are all original. I have no idea how much of the glass is still original. Back in the 1700s, there wasn't a lot of glass made in the United States. A lot of it had to come from England. And all of the bricks that we're going to see all came to Georgetown in the belly of boats. So after the rice trade became very, very important to the area, the boats would just fill with bricks, and they would come into Georgetown, offload the brick, because there was no brick kiln here. So if you wanted brick, that's how you had to buy it. These fabulous trees are our live oaks. They're called live because they always have green leaves, but also that means when some of you are shoveling snow, we're still raking and blowing leaves. But it's nice in the winter. The moss is called Spanish moss. It's named after the beards of the Spaniards who came here in the 1500s, those nasty beards. Where I'm going tomorrow? You're not with your children? Wow.
It is. Or you live in Florida?
They don't like us as much as we don't like them.
You get annoyed by.
I get annoyed by because they're scary.
Y'all, this is the carriage block. When they finally brought a road in from the highway, this is the front of the house. So the carriages would come in that way, around the back of the house, here to the front of the house, and ladies would step down onto this carriage block out of their carriages because they were high. This is also where gentlemen would mount their horses too, if they didn't have somebody to help them. Look at that baby. That's a soul. Is it him? Yes. He's too pretty to be him.
Everybody said the same thing.
Let's put the extra sticker.
Come on in. How you doing?
Go on.
Are you going to be my doorkeeper? You're going to be the last every time? This was his country house. This was his rice plantation. The Lynches, like all the other people in the rice culture, not the cotton culture that we all know from Gone with the Wind, these people were a little different. They were different in the way they treated their slaves. They were different in the way that they sold their crops. And they were different in the way that they didn't build one gigantic house like they had in Gone with the Wind. You know, that fabulous Tara. these people have multiple houses. So the Lynches, who built this house, would come here right after the social season in Charleston was over. Charleston's about 45 miles south of here, and it definitely is the epicenter of this area. The social season was over. It was the end of the year, so it was very cool. It's the coolest that it's going to be here. They would come out here, and they would spend sometimes several weeks, sometimes maybe 2 months. They would leave here when the first mosquito showed up, and I mean they would boogie out of here because back then a lot of the mosquitoes carried malaria, and they knew it. They called it bilibus fever, but they knew that the mosquitoes carried it. So first mosquito, they were gone. They went off to another one of their houses. They left between 180 and 200 slaves here, with an overseer, with a head slave who was called the driver, and they worked across the river in those rice fields.
Lives here. If they were bitten by mosquitoes and died, what would happen?
They died.
They just die?
They died.
Nobody accounted for anything?
Everyone accounted for every single soul because, y'all get on the same page here, they were enslaved Africans. They were also property to their owners. Their owners paid taxes on them. Their owners knew their value, and therefore they had a record of every single one. Supposedly, I haven't seen statistics, but this actually makes sense to me. When the young men, and it was always the young, strong men who would work in those rice fields, when they entered the rice field, they had a life expectancy of between 3 and 5 years. Because we have gators every day, we have more poisonous snakes than you can imagine, and then we also had those horrible, horrible mosquitoes. And think about it too. What they were doing was they were translating a swamp into a cultivated rice field. So we're talking about the 1700s, and they're over there with hatchets and machetes. No power tools. They're over there in heat a whole lot hotter than this, because this is nothing for us. So that was their life. Now, there were house servants that worked in the house, and we'll talk about them too. But we're going to go in the dining room now, okay? So come on over. So all the colors, y'all, that you see throughout the house. Yes, it's that wonderful lighted candle, isn't it cool? Y'all, all the colors in the house that you see are all the original colors. They've been repainted over the 284 years, but always back. So this is an important color also to our culture here, because this is a variation of indigo blue. And indigo was our cash crop before rice. Indigo was very, very important to the area.
What is indigo?
It was brought here by a 13-year-old girl. And that's a wonderful story unto itself.
What is indigo?
I will tell you in a minute.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm so happy that you're asking questions. It was brought to our country by a 13-year-old girl, and if any of you ladies read historical fiction, I have a great book for you. It's called Indigo Girl, and it's very accurate historically. It's a really good read. It's a great summer read. Indigo is that plant right there, and it is used to create dye, specifically blue dye. So you can take indigo from lavender to the deepest, richest royal blue, navy blue color. All of the people in this area grew indigo before rice. They had no concept of rice. They all got together in a co-op, and they would send the crop to Great Britain. And Great Britain would buy our indigo, supposedly because it was the most saturated, for their British Royal Navy uniforms. All of the slaves in coastal South Carolina and down into coastal Georgia all came from the same area in West Africa, all around Sierra Leone. They all spoke Gullah, so they could all communicate with each other, which was a very unusual thing, because usually slaves were divided so that they didn't speak the same language. But all of these slaves were kept together. Guess what they grew? They all grew rice. Probably starting in the 1400s. I mean, starting at the beginning of time. They were rice farmers, and they're still rice farmers. So they somehow were nice enough to share all their knowledge And that's how this got to be a whole rice economy. It wasn't just a crop anymore. It was a huge economy because it was so big to the area. So this room is exactly the way it would have been back then. The house is called a colonial four-square. It was a very common construction. 4 rooms down, 4 identical rooms up. I think what makes this house incredibly different is that we have cellars, and we're going to go down into the cellar. Wow. Nobody in South Carolina has a cellar, y'all. Nobody in North Carolina has a cellar. Nobody in Georgia, nobody in Florida. We don't build houses with cellars. This one has a cellar. The family that owns the plantation now lives in this house. Mrs. Beatty runs the tea room, which actually is a restaurant. It's not just a tea room. And Mr. Beatty takes care of all the grounds. He has a crew that works under him. So they leave the house every morning, and we get to go through it.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
At the end of the Civil War, houses were plundered. If there weren't Northern soldiers here, then the slaves that were here, that were emancipated, came into the house and took whatever they want. Guess what? This is their home too. Most of them were born here. This is a portrait of Elizabeth Alston Lynch. She's the first mistress of this house. She is in Alston, from Alston Plantation, which is now Brook Green Gardens, which is something that you're going to drive past. She's quite a beautiful lady. She's in this beautiful dress. I just wanted to show you all about 18th century Photoshop. This is Photoshopped, basically. Now remember, it was an original oil painting. But what the painters would do back then, is if they didn't have a current commission, they would just paint bodies with no heads, just bodies, over and over and over again. So when you went in to sit for your portrait, you could pick from a bunch of different torsos. Now this one happens to have a 14-inch waist, girls. I don't know anybody who would choose that. But again, these people, the Lynches were the second wealthiest people in the state. They were the equivalent of modern day multimillionaires. She could have had any painting she wanted. They could have built any kind of house they wanted. But she chose this, probably knowing full well what was going to happen. And what happened was, through history, we've seen this dress 5 more times on prominent Americans. This happens to be a duchess. It's the same exact dress, and if you would see it in color, you'd really see it's the same exact dress. She added some buttons, and then art historians have found 4 more oil paintings. So, pretty interesting, huh? This is a room where I need to show you this magnificent invention. Again, the enslaved Africans that were here were geniuses when it came to rice. They knew. So when they were clearing the swamp to turn them into fields, they would clear a certain amount of acres on either side, and they would leave a long canal. At the end of the construction period, these would be built. This is called a rice trunk. And you may see pieces of them when you're going about your day, if you're going up and down the highway, especially up on the Waccamaw now. This whole part here is all buried in the ground. So what you'll see is this or this. Here's a photograph, which I can't pass around. I used to be able to. So when y'all come take a look at that, that's the end of the rice trunk. So this is what they did. They needed to irrigate the field. They could never depend on just the rain. And they also knew that rice always liked to have its feet wet. So they needed basically to flood the fields. So that's how they irrigated them. For those of you who don't know, because you didn't study U.S. history growing up, this is a depiction of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So the story goes, in history, the story that we've all been taught, and I don't know why, you need to come up here. You're the shortest one, and you're always at the end. Come up here. Yes, ma'am. You are the shortest one. What this picture captures are the faces of every single man who signed the Declaration of Independence. Now, I'm here to tell you that, of course, the Declaration was written. Of course, it was signed. It never happened like this. They never, ever, ever met publicly together. This was supposed to have happened in downtown Philadelphia in a public restaurant, in a pub. Now, I'm here to tell you, think about what they're doing. This is the highest act of treason you could be accused of. We were a colony then. We had a king. we were plotting to overthrow the king. The king would not be happy. The king didn't like the colonies anyway. King George, we weren't making enough money for him. He never cared about populating this area. He just wanted more money for the crown. So he was upset with us anyway. Had he known that all of his best advisors were all plotting against him, he would have killed them, all of them. So they never met together. They could have sent 2 soldiers in there and shot everybody. They met a couple at a time. Had he found out what was on the line here for these gentlemen, their lives, the lives of their families, all of their property, anything that they owned, all the people would have all been killed. These men probably would have been beheaded because he would have wanted to make a spectacle of them.
What's up? I mean, obviously they were popping back then.
They were Monday. Yeah, I don't have to take pictures. You can send me what you say.
My son was the same way. He had these gorgeous white ringlets and everyone thought he was
Just don't touch anything, okay, kids? Go ahead, Tree. Go on.
But back in the day, in the 1700s, most people in this area traveled by boat. So that's how you got places, that's how you got things to come, is they would come on a boat. Actually, the girls would have been in the back, and they would have slept together in that bed, because girls back then slept together, especially when they would come here because it was cold. And the only heat would have been fireplace. This would have been either one of these. One would have been the parents' room, and one would have been Thomas Jr.'s room, since he was the heir, and he was the only boy. Because boys had
The uniform.
special. Unlike today, we get to
Wow.
Look, check out the old time dress.
Let me see, look at the prices.
Hey, hey.
Three chairs were for $1.50.
Those are prices?
Yeah, for a piece of pig.
Table 50
Chair
cents.
was $1.
Oh.
Table was 50 cents.
That's what they used to pay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because
Way back.
90 cents.
Oh, that's really cool, actually.
Oh, you just said look, but you can't go in.
50 cents for a table. We're going into the cellar. This is kind of scary. I ain't gonna hold you guys.
You know, they had to throw what you said.
Look, it's like everybody.
If you enjoyed it, go to the store.
Yo, I'm gonna have to kneel.
Everybody's short.
I'm gonna have to, bro. I'm gonna have to kneel to get down there, chief. Let's smack my head though. No. Oh my God, the roof is right there.
Remember I told you this was a colonial 4-square house. So there were four rooms down, 4 rooms up. There are 8 fireplaces total. And the fireplaces stack on top of each other because the house is perfectly symmetrical. This right here is a foundation for a fireplace. Y'all can see that one. You see all the slits in the wood? What that is a wheat thresher. So they would take oyster shells and sharpen them, and they would slide an oyster shell in each one of those slots. Here's another one over here. The mule would pull it, and that threshed the wheat. Y'all, that's the end of the tour. If you have questions, I would love to answer them. If I don't know the answer, which, sometimes I don't, I will find out, and I will let you know.
Where you said that the family had a house in the West Indies?
I'm sorry?
The family, the Lynch
My
family.
family?
The Lynch family.
The Lynch family.
They had a, they owned a property.
The
in
Lynch family came here from Ireland.
Yeah.
And when they came here from Ireland, they were wealthy when they got here. And I believe in the early 1600s they came. They came with an early group of settlers.
I know. Oh, yes. Where? Right here.
Oh my.
Oh my. This is really cool, actually. So,
Look at that. Look at that
I think we're all going up there to take a picture, so I'll be back. Alright, so we're gonna be seeing this like special video, this exclusive video. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to record or not. But if I am, then we lit. If I'm not, I'm sorry guys. But yeah, that's just the way it is, B. It'd be like that sometimes. Copyright.
Oh, sorry.
Alright, my Vegas. So couldn't really record the video like that, but the video was pretty much saying everything that we heard from like inside the tour about how like the house and like the history and like what the rooms are and like who like they belong to and stuff. So what? Yep, yo, mosquitoes are out here biting, bro. I got like a whole bunch of mosquito bites like on my arm. Look at this bell, bro. Bye. We are done with the plantation house. It was very, very good to visit. Felt good, you know, just to, I mean, it didn't feel good to see it, but it felt good to learn the history about it. Learn the history about the South Carolina slaves and the house slaves and the field slaves and the differences and living conditions. But now, I think we are going to be going to Myrtle Beach. So, Jesus Christ, so much flies out here. But we're going to be heading to Myrtle Beach now, and
Black Coke, give me legal.
All the choices you made, would you make them again?
Yo, Jason, where we at, bro? Where we at, bro? Do you even know where we're at? Ryan, do you know where we at? Does anyone know? Yeah, we at Cracker Barrel.